Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast. I am one of your aforementioned Brothers in Kayfabe, El Gigante, Jake Keel. And standing next to me, he's holding on to the tag rope right now. He's ready to take the hot tag. Landon Bumgarner, Mr. Rasslin in the match. What's going on, Landon?
Hey, what's going on, Jake? It is great to be back here at the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode. Even though we are getting ready to embark on a very gloomy week, been some sad moments the past couple of days, which we'll get in a little bit. But other than that, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing great. I'm on a high right now because my wife looked at me the other day and goes, "Hey, if you had a choice, would you sit up high or floor seats?" And I went, what are we talking about? She goes, "Well, just make a choice." And I go, "Floor seats." She goes, "Okay, I just got you floor seats to AEW in Garland, Texas on the return tour." I was like, are you for real? Like,
dude, what a surprise.
Right? She was like, for those that don't know, in the fall, me and my wife are going to start trying to have our first child. We want to start, making that process, as if I don't have enough beard in my, or gray in my beard right now. And so she was like, I want to be able to do this while we can still really afford to just go and be away for a few days and, not have the mess of a kid around. And, we just got to figure out something for Dottie for a couple days. But, so yeah, I'm going to be on the floor at AEW in Dallas, Garland, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. But, dude, I'm on a high. It's great.
Dude,
I've never been to an AEW show.
How does it feel knowing you're about to be at live wrestling once again, and not like local live wrestling, like established live wrestling?
I've been to a couple local shows. There was, 30 people there, but this is like no social distancing. Like, we're in Texas.
Yeah, everything's wide open.
We don't know if we'll be required to wear a mask yet, but it's like, it's probably to the what the arena says. But like, I'm so excited to go. My wife bought us new shirts to wear. I got I've got Friends in Dark Places by the Hangman shirt. She got the Orange Cassidy what is the Michelangelo, the Sistine Chapel?
Oh, like the it's, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like God,
like the creation
Adam.
of the world.
Yeah.
Creation of man, I think is what it's called. And it's a shirt, it's Orange Cassidy shirt that's literally the same painting, but orange is in the place of Adam. And I'm like, okay, you have to get that shirt. She's like, all I have is a Karushita shirt. She's like, I really want somebody else. She almost bought a Penelope Ford shirt. Amanda's been on a real Penelope Ford kick lately.
I can see that.
And I am such a huge fan of Hangman, but I didn't have any of his shirts. Oh, so prim and proper, dude, with the beverage, if you will. We'll leave that for the Patreon.
Pinkies out.
We'll leave that for the Patreon viewers. But yeah, man, it's been great. How are you doing? Like, we haven't talked. We text every once in a while, but this is when we talk. So
yeah, coming up, the whole, a good bulk of season 1 of the Brothers in Kayfabe was talking about how our lives were changing and things were getting busy, and that seems to just continue to be the theme of our lives. I'm hoping my schedule is going to get a little bit relaxed, at least for the rest of May. And then it'll kick in high gear about early to mid-June for a while. But it feels good to have just some time to watch some wrestling and to dive deep into some things. As we were talking about before we went on air this week, I got my hands on a copy of, it's like WCW, the best of the Nature Boy Ric Flair or something like that.
Woo!
And it doesn't have the matches on it, but it's got like a 30-minute documentary just about Ric Flair and WCW. So I'm eager to see what that's like. And just go ahead.
No, I can't wait to hear your review on it.
Yeah, because it's like, I think I've really been on a kick of just what's obscure licensed wrestling videos that have been released. Like, is there like a weird, hey, here's the best Norman Smiley in WCW, or like, I don't know, here's the best of the Headbangers in WWF, like something just niche and obscure. That's really what I've been into lately, and so who knows what else is out there. There is something I was made aware of that our listeners will get to hear later on in the episode, because we've got something special in store
Very
for
special.
them. But it's been sad the last couple of days. We lost an icon, I think could be an appropriate word in the pro wrestling community. Absolutely an infamous, notorious icon, an extreme icon, a hardcore one, a legit gangsta, New Jack.
It's a very sad situation. I mean, a guy that lived his life the way he did, and he goes out by a heart attack. It's just interesting, it's weird whenever we lose someone so young, because he was young.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when he was in ECW, he was in his 20s. Like, and that was not long ago. What was he, 50, I think?
Yeah, early 50s.
I'm going to look it up. But
and it's just interesting with his reputation, there's such a mixed reaction.
So he was 58.
58, okay. So a little bit older, but still that's young. But you also have to take in everything he's lived through. And it's a miracle, like, if you think about it, what he was able to achieve given the circumstances he grew up under.
Yeah.
And just some of the obstacles he faced in his personal life. But love him or hate him, like, you can't deny, you can't deny who New Jack is and what he's about.
Me, I'm not the deathmatch kind of guy. And he is, on all accounts, deathmatch, extreme, hardcore wrestler. Like, the dude, you look at his forehead, like, what kind of style of wrestling he was. But that dude is probably one of the best workers I've ever seen, just because I don't know who the real New Jack is. Yeah. And I don't think anybody does.
I saw a tweet.
His wife, maybe.
Yeah. I saw a tweet, going back to him being a great worker. I can't remember who. It was somebody talking about how they were doing a local show in the early 2000s, and New Jack was there, and they were just going over they were like kind of walking through their match before the show started. And New Jack was teaching this person like how to actually like lock up properly, and was just showing them like, hey, whenever you step through like this.
Yeah.
This is where you want your momentum to be. And the guy was like, man, like, I would have never known you were as good as a worker as you are. And he said, good, keep it that way, or I'm going to have to cut you. And it's just like that's New Jack to a core. I mean, his stuff in Smoky Mountain is great. There's a lot of controversial moments with just some of the feuds he was in, and I think on Dark Side of the Ring they even talk about some of the horrible racism problems that he and some of the others faced. during that time. But you also, like, once again, love him or hate him, like Jim Cornette of all people has continuously, talked about how solid New Jack was in the ring. And, he's kind of the ideal wrestler in the fact that he knows how to do everything. So he has the freedom to do whatever he wants, whether that's, if he wants to brawl or if he wants to go to Dave Meltzer's, unbearable, dirty room and put on a 6-star match, he can. But it's just, there's only ever going to be one New Jack. I mean, Nick Gage is kind of close, but still, that's no New Jack.
He's like this modern era's New Jack, but like, it's weird to think of the things that he did in Smoky Mountain. Like whenever I watched that Dark Side, that's really my knowledge of New Jack. I've seen a couple of his matches. It's just, he was never the type of wrestler for me. And that's fine. Wrestling is for everyone. And it's weird to see the storyline he did in Smoky Mountain, because knowing that is Cornette's territory, that's not Cornette's style.
Yeah.
And it's just weird to think that he let that go on in his territory and he booked it.
I think on the Dark Side of the Ring episode, New Jack's talking about how they came up with the gangsters, and Jim Cornette's like, "You guys could be called the Gangsters, and it'd be real cool." And New Jack's like, "No, we're gonna be the Gangsters." He's like, "You could be the Gangsters and roll around with the Midnight Express, but we're gonna be the Gangsters." I'll say this, so depending on what era of wrestling you grew up in, there's the possibility you encountered a heel that you genuinely hated and you genuinely feared. Friend of the podcast, David, has talked about how he was afraid of Kane and how he would sometimes, be looking out the window to see if Kane's walking down the street with a barrel of gasoline. And for me, that's how I felt about New Jack. It's just like, as cool as it would be to meet New Jack, I would be so terrified of doing anything to annoy him or like be an inconvenience to him and him just immediately carve me up in front of everybody.
Yeah,
but it's like
that's what's so scary about him, is he was known for shooting too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'll never forget. I can't remember who, but there's someone. New Jack's like, "Hey, are you cool with using a staple gun?" He's like, "Yeah." And so he staples. He either staples the guy's tongue or he staples the guy's mouth shut. And he's like, "Well, you said you were cool with staples," and it's just like, how terrifying. But as a fan watching, it's like, dude, like whenever New Jack's music hits, it's like, okay, like
we're about to see some crazy stuff.
Yeah, like New Jack is here to destroy everything in his path. Paul Heyman did a very heartfelt.
I haven't got to watch that yet.
It's good. It's different. I think people are expecting it to be really sappy, but it was just, you could tell it was coming from someone who appreciated New Jack. And I know they've had their heat in the past. But he starts it off talking about how if you were to tell me New Jack is dead, I would tell you, no, he's not. He's faking his death so he can make all this money off of it just to come back and say, "Look, I took your money again." But
hey, listen,
it's good. For those of you listening, if you haven't seen it, reach out. It's from Talking Smack. It's all over YouTube and WWE social media. I was surprised WWE said anything about it.
Right.
Because there's no
way. He's
way,
never worked for them.
No, and there's no way he ever could or ever will.
Oh, well, he was never going to be Denzel, but he could have been Denzel's friend.
Yeah. I'll say this. Let's go back to 2000, 2001 to the invasion angle and have New Jack lead ECW.
Oh my gosh.
As opposed to, it's like, okay, everyone that's on Team ECW, well, they're currently a WWF superstar. And everyone on Team WCW are just all the cruiserweights and the people we couldn't terminate their contracts fast enough.
Buff Bagwell, those kind of guys.
Dude, like I love Hurricane, but like seeing him like Sean Stasiak and like those kind of guys, it's like, okay, it's like Stone Cold's breaking into the building and he beats up Shane Helms. Like WCW's greatest defenses are just crumbling.
Could you imagine that whole deal if the NWO came over right away?
Yeah, like that's what's crazy. If it wasn't for the
If
contract
Goldberg,
situation, like it could have legitimately arguably been the biggest angle of all time, because you've teamed WWF in the ring, and then you have all the NWO, you've Ric Flair, you've Goldberg, you've DDP, like all those guys coming over.
I mean, there's an alternate universe where in 2001 Sting comes to WWF.
Yeah, dude, you cannot tell me that WrestleMania 17 and WrestleMania 18 would have been filled with NWO versus DX, Sting versus Undertaker. Like it.
Oh my gosh.
I know at one point, I want to say maybe it was Undertaker Sting, or not Undertaker Sting, Kurt Angle and Sting was pitched for a round. I want to say it may have been for WrestleMania 18. It was talked about, but Sting was just like, no, like, I don't trust WWE to protect my character and to take care of it. But it's just like in wrestling, the world of what ifs.
Like, imagine that alternate universe where they automatically absorb these contracts and they have to come work. Like, it's not like WCW mishandled them, their contracts. And Sting is wrestling Undertaker, DX versus NWO the right way. I know Hogan or Goldberg versus Austin, which was something everyone wanted to see at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Before Austin takes his ball and goes home. Like, we're way off topic.
Yeah. But all that to say, New Jack, rest in power. It's sad when we lose anyone,
right,
in the wrestling world.
It's just such a surreal thing because these guys are larger than life. But then you remember, it brings you back to remembering these guys are just human beings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
New Jack is not Jerome Young. There's a little bit of Jerome Young in New Jack, but New Jack is not the father, the husband. We are hurting, but his family is hurting even more.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, rest in power, New Jack. Let us know in the Facebook group what your favorite New Jack moment was, or your favorite New Jack match. I think that'd be something. Nobody post the mass transit incident, please.
Please do not.
Our entire page will be taken down. Speaking of our page, Jake, there's some photographs you want to talk about.
Yeah, I quickly want to send out another rest in peace. Rest in peace, The Miz. He got eaten by zombies tonight on Backlash. Yeah, so that's a thing. Yeah. So someone recently shared a deal, and I want to touch on this quickly. Someone recently found film that they had taken on their portable camera at WrestleMania 3. There are pictures of Andre getting body slammed by Hogan from the crowd. There are multiple pictures from that match. I think there's even one that Hogan is tearing the shirt, which is okay. That's cool.
Yeah, to have that.
You don't see stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say to have that, as a fan photo, as opposed to like, you expect WWE to release that.
Right.
But to be like, hey, I got a picture of the shirt rip.
Like, look at this. Macho coming off the top rope. That's amazing.
It's impeccable.
Let's see. I'm gonna pull up. Excuse me. There's Hogan ripping the shirt. Excuse me, as an app is telling me that we're getting hail in Texas. There is Hogan slamming Andre. Could you imagine just finding this film? Like,
why can't anything like that ever happen to us?
Right? Well, I mean, first of all, we would have had to been alive at this point, but
still, why can't we have, why can't you be working on a house and some guy's like, oh, hey, I'm just throwing this stuff out to the curb if any of you guys want it, and it's just photos and tape.
There's the Little People's match. Just look at all the people there, though. Like,
right.
It's insane. It's weird even right now to see that many people somewhere just because of how crazy this year's been. And I mean, we're over a year from the whole pandemic starting, but like, it's just weird to see that many people in one place.
Yeah. I mean, our minds are no longer conditioned to expect that or to see that or to even comprehend it whenever we do see it.
It's amazing. There are people way off subject. I was just on Facebook looking at those pictures, and then I caught some other stuff. All these people that said blood and guts set the wrestling world back because of the finish. Otherwise, it was an amazing match. The finish sucked. The finish sucks. I'm an AEW mark. The finish sucked. But now they're defending zombies in WWE.
Go ahead.
Are we on like Earth 2? I'm almost afraid to be a wrestling fan anymore.
Yeah, because the rules of being a wrestling fan are so fickle and ever changing. I saw a thread today talking about in 2001, whenever Stone Cold, the McMahons are like, hey, Stone Cold, if you ever want another title shot, you have to sell all these hot dogs and all these beers during Raw tonight. And if you fail, you're not getting that title shot. And it's like, obviously everything Stone Cold's a part of is gold, but it's like, you think about how much people would have eaten that up now. But I guarantee if you were to watch SmackDown and anybody on the main roster is doing that, or anybody on Raw is doing that, like, are you going to watch Drew McIntyre sell hot dogs on Raw? It's just like, it's interesting what people cling to and what they'll defend and then what they'll like easily turn their backs on. Because some of it's super obvious, but then it's like, what? Like, this is way worse.
There is a difference. Drew McIntyre is a star. He's a future Hall of Famer, but he will never be Stone Cold. It's a case-by-case situation on that. But like, I'm sorry. You can't tell me that AEW is trash and set the wrestling world back because of blood and guts having a bad finish. And then say WWE is doing great when a match just ended, a lumberjack match that had zombies around the ring for Miz and Damian Priest, which makes no sense. Why are they there? There's no storyline reason.
There's no zombies related to him at all.
And then having one of your top ambassadors to the company get eaten by zombies to finish the match. Like, if Peacock didn't have all this other content that wasn't wrestling, I would delete Peacock right now. If it was the WWE network, I'd be done with WWE network. I'm just, and like I said, wrestling is for everybody. There are probably some people that enjoyed it, like whatever, but you can't say both.
Yeah. If you enjoy that, let us know. I'm genuinely curious.
I'm genuinely curious too.
Because it's like, you know, we've talked about this before. It's like you can have over the top, larger than life stuff, but you have to have the people involved that can pull that off.
Right.
Like, you know, if it was The Fiend or The Undertaker, okay. Like,
oh, it makes sense.
Yeah. But it's like The Miz and Damian Priest. Well, don't worry. Bad Bunny made all these zombies.
Well, you know why they were there, right? They're advertising Batista's new zombie movie.
No.
Army of the Dead. Literally, the match ended. Damien gets out of the ring, points to the Titantron that says Army of the Dead. It was a commercial.
In such a bad way. Like, I wish, like, okay, if they're going to go that route, have the zombies come out, storm the ring, have Batista come out and just clear them all with clotheslines and spine busters.
Right.
It's like, at least that makes a little bit more sense than it's like, oh, you know.
Yeah, they ate the Miz, who will be back on Monday Night Raw tomorrow night.
Yeah. Just in time to talk about why the Marine 6 is better than Army of the Dead. Oh, man.
Okay, well, we've been going for a long time. We've got a special guest tonight.
We do. And this is a perfect segue talking about just the state of the wrestling business, because I got into that. We do have a special interview with Hannibal from the Hannibal TV, most notably known for his shoot interviews of legends and professional wrestlers on YouTube. I guarantee if you've watched any shoot interviews on YouTube, you've definitely come across either one of his compilations or one of his full shoots. So I've kind of teased it on and off throughout the last several months of the podcast. I've been working for Hannibal for over a year now as his audio editor. And one of the things I've been trying to secure is an interview with him, just to talk to somebody who honestly has a very interesting story in wrestling. We didn't get into all of it. There's a documentary he was a part of about how he was actually signed with WWE or about to sign. And then some things happened as a result to a match with Abdullah the Butcher that prevented him from being able to be there for WWE. And so I encourage you guys to check that out. We didn't get into it, but we got into everything that happened before and things that have happened after. So I'm very, very excited for you guys to listen to that. It's definitely our biggest guest so far.
Definitely.
Hannibal's an awesome guy, knowledgeable guy. And we get into, you know, what ratings are, what they're compared. Believe it or not, there has been with Lashley as WWE champion post WrestleMania this year, there is actually a spike in the ratings with Lashley as champion now.
Well, it's an interesting story.
Yeah. And it's just the reality of, you know, we talk about the stuff you see a mile away and the stuff you never see coming. And so I think you all listening will enjoy that. I'm excited for you guys to listen.
I'm excited to hear it. I know we've pre-taped it just because his schedule is crazy and it was kind of hard to get him on. So Landon got about an hour with him the other night. So we're going to kick it over to that here in a second, and then we'll be back here after. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say. I haven't even heard this interview yet, so I'm hearing it for the first time with you folks at home. So Landon, you got anything more to say about the interview before we kick it in?
No, I think we just jump right into it. So here it is.
Hello, everyone. This is Lord Alfred Hayes speaking to you from the
Brothers in Kayfabe
Video Control. I'm very pleased to host the next program in the official
BIK
home video series on outstanding individuals.
Well, today with me is Hannibal from the Hannibal TV. Hannibal, thank you so much for jumping on and giving me some of your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be back from Texas with my dog here, who's going to be joining me for this interview. She's been kind of glued to me since I've been returned to Canada.
So how has it been? Obviously, as we're kind of hopefully fingers crossed on the end of the whole pandemic thing, how has that been for you just being in Canada? I know with the border situations, it's been pretty tough, but how has that been for you personally?
Well, I missed about 4 months of it, but it is pretty brutal here in Canada. They're still on full lockdown right now. You cannot even, like, I couldn't go visit my family members right now, or I'd be subject to a $2,000 fine. The police can pull you over to find out where you're going. Everything's pretty much closed. And yes, the border situation is very tight. They haven't vaccinated hardly anyone here. Lucky for me, I had my my vaccinations in the U.S., where at least in Texas they've done a great job with these drive-through vaccinations, where you just roll down your window and get the shot. And I've been attending events over the past bunch of months with like 1,000 people plus. I even went to a baseball game that had 40,000 people.
Nice.
So you could say the vaccine was effective on me. And even though I had the vaccine, Canada still makes you do these take-home tests. I got one right here. I had to do 3 of these that you have to do while talking to a person to make sure you're actually doing them, then mailing them off. And the 2 that I've done so far have confirmed that I, in fact, have not caught anything. They even have a thing where they don't want people traveling in Canada. So there's actually a $2,000 travel fine for people leaving Canada. There's a loophole, though. If you fly into an American city and take a cab across the border, you don't have to pay the $2,000 fine. So I did that. It's still expensive, but it's not 2,000 more expensive.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
did that when I came back. So luckily, no, I don't know anyone that's had it. The worst part about it, obviously, was my grandmother passed away last November, and I was very, very close to her. So from like March to September, they wouldn't let me go visit her. And I was used to visiting her every day. When they realized in September that she was going to pass away quickly, they made an exception. They gave me a couple duties and they considered me a caregiver so I could still go see her every day. So for me, that was the toughest part of this so far, above not being able to promote. Because obviously I'm the promoter of Great North Wrestling Canada. I can't promote. But obviously not being able to be with someone when they're in their last days is going to be hard on you. So that was the hardest.
Absolutely. My younger sister, she's a nurse here, and she graduated nursing school last year in 2020, and immediately that, you would think, hey, beginner nurse, let's start out easy, but they put her in the ICU with COVID patients, and I know for her it was really hard to have to be, the last person someone sees as they're taking their final breaths. And I just hope as time goes on, we slowly, everything will kind of open up more and get safer. Cause obviously the physical tolls of the whole pandemic, but also just, the emotional, the mental tolls and
the financial too.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think we've talked about this before. I'm a musician, or I joke that I'm retired now because you can't play live music anywhere because everything's shut down, and the few places that are open, I would lose money performing there, and it's just frustrating. But I'm glad you've been able to slowly get your way back into the United States and getting things going. I think you've done a phenomenal job so far through the pandemic with your Skype interviews, your online interviews. How has that been, getting more remote interviews versus in-person interviews?
At first, I didn't like it, but I actually like it better. It's cheaper because to drive or fly somewhere where there's a convention like I had to do in the past, there's travel involved and you got to get your own hotel. Then you got to find the guy. Sometime they no show and you drive to a town for nothing. At least with this way, if they no show, you haven't left your house. There's no travel costs involved. Yeah, there is technical issues sometimes. That sucks. But overall, when the lockdown first happened, I still technically have a job, a real job that I've had for, I guess, 13 years now, working for the city of Ottawa here in Canada in the Parks and Recreations branch. And as my YouTube channel has become more popular, I scaled back to part-time. Then I scaled back to relief, but I was still doing a bunch of relief shifts a month when the pandemic started. So then when they first went into lockdown, I'm like, oh shit, I'm losing, because my Parks and Rec job, it's been closed for over a year now. I'm still technically employed, but my facility has not opened back up. So I'm like, I'm not going to have that. And I'm not going to be able to drive across the border to get interviews. This was before I realized we could do online interviews. And then strangely enough, I had my highest profit month ever the next month because everyone was home on lockdown watching YouTube. And then we slowly realized, oh, well, with these remote interviews, they're overall less expensive. There are some that you got to throw out because the technical quality is so bad, and there's other technical issues sometimes. But overall, I think, as you said, I've done the best I could do in this situation. I even went to the US for about 4 months and stayed there because you can't cross back and forth easily right now, and got footage. And I think I maximized that situation to the best of my abilities. It was originally supposed to last a few more months. It didn't. But at this point, a lot of my fans have been wanting more shoot interviews anyways, so they're going to get what they want now. I'm back in Canada. I can't promote right now because of the lockdown, so I'm going to be focusing on shoot interviews and news and UFO related content, which I also get into.
Awesome. Let's just jump into the topic of shoot interviews. Out of all the ones you've recorded so far, who's been your favorite guest to interview?
That's really a tough one because they're all different in different ways. Billy Graham, because I consider him like a grandfather figure to me. I really like interviewing him, and because he's such a great talker and I'm such a fan of him, it's always an honor. Honky Tonk Man, the one that has almost 4 million views, is my most profitable interview. And I think it's the highest viewed online shoot interview of all time that anyone's ever done. So that one's up in my favorites. Boss Rutan was the hero of mine as a amateur kickboxer. So getting to talk to him. Paul Hellyer, who is a former Canadian Minister of Defense and Deputy Prime Minister. Yes, he's actually the highest ranking military official in the world to go on record that say UFOs exist. So because he's the highest ranking military official I've ever talked to, that one's special to me. I also have interviewed Nick Pope, who used to be in charge of investigating every single UFO report that the British military received. So I'm kind of honored to talk to those guys because they're in a different domain and they had such high-ranking government jobs. But I like all the interviews for different reasons. The one I did with Vader, I had so much fun that weekend that I was in Colorado, not only with Vader, but it was a fun weekend. Maybe one day I'll get into it in a book. But there's different reasons why some of them have been more fun. It's not necessarily the interviews. Sometimes hanging out with them is good. Sid is always entertaining. Sid was another hero of mine. Then you meet some people that turn out to be real pieces of trash, and it's the opposite. But yeah, everyone's different. I mean, I just did Kurt Angle last month, and that was a guy that I never necessarily thought I'd get the opportunity to interview. So there's been some cool ones. I know it sounds silly, but Malibu from American Gladiators was also in Mortal Kombat and so many movies. Even though he's not the greatest actor, I was always a fan of his.
Yeah.
And I actually became friends with him out of interviewing him, and I stay in contact with him. So to me, that one's also special, just because I looked up to him as a kid. So it might not always be the ones that people expect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, there's the people that everybody looks up to, but whenever you get to have kind of that special connection of like, oh no, like that's my personal favorite. You know, just to put in wrestling terms, like, you know, everyone at a certain time was a fan of Hulk Hogan, but to be the person, it's like, yeah, like Hulk Hogan's cool, but like, man, Gorilla Monsoon's my favorite wrestler. Like that's the person I want to sit down and have a conversation with. So I totally get with what you mean by that. To kind of spin that question a little bit, and I don't mean for this to sound dark, but is there somebody you wish you could have done an interview with that is already passed away?
Roddy Piper would be the first one that comes to mind. Lou Thez, I would have liked to. I'm trying to think. There were Johnny K9, who is going to have a Dark Side of the Ring episode. I mean, he's an unusual one, but because he was a criminal, and I think I could have went in some different places with that interview. When I heard he died, I'm like, damn it, that's one that I wanted. Sadly, Kamala, I did interview him, but sadly, he lives in Mississippi and it was hot that day and he lives in a trailer and he was nearly dying even when I interviewed him. We could not turn off the air conditioners in his trailer because he needs to stay somewhat temperature regulated. So there was a lot of background noise in that one. And that was one I really wanted to redo before he passed, and I didn't get that opportunity, sadly. So that was one that really bothered me. I didn't get the chance to redo, but at least I got something with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me personally, I selfishly would have loved to have seen you do a shoot interview with Bruiser Brody, had the timelines matched up. Obviously, shoot interviews weren't a thing at the time of his passing, but just the similarities I see between you two. I selfishly
think he actually has the first ever shoot interview. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's some. I asked his wife what the origin of it is, and she doesn't recall. But there is a like semi out of character interview with Bruiser Brody from probably around 87 or 88.
I know on Dark Side of the Ring, on his episode, there's some footage where he says his real name. And then he's kind of like, wait, you know, we can't air that part. Do you know, is that part of the same one or is that just?
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah,
Oh, it
because
is.
I believe that's something that it never came out at the time, because he says a couple times in it, we're not going to air this or that. But obviously 30 years or so have passed. If his wife's not going to go after the murderer, I'm sure she's not going to go after a guy that posts him out of character in an interview 30 years later. But that, I have watched that maybe 10 times just because it's so interesting to kind of hear his views on stuff, and in a time where nobody was talking like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what that's like. I'm gonna have to do some some real deep diving to see if I can try and find that, because like I said, I've seen the snippets, but I'd be curious to see the whole thing.
I've actually asked a lot of people if they know who actually did that, and nobody knows where it comes from. It's not hard to look up, though. If you search for it, it's out there. Who actually did the interview? That's a mystery that may never be solved. His wife doesn't know, and I've asked some people that would have been around the industry around that time and would have been friends with him, and they don't know who it is. So I've even asked like Rob Feinstein, who was one of the, if not the first quote unquote shoot interviewer. I asked, like, was that you by any chance? And he's like, no, I have no idea who that was.
That's so interesting. Because, obviously with wrestling history, there's those lost tapes of, infamous things that happen that either no one knows where they are and no one's seen them since they happened, or the other side, it's like, we don't know who did that, but it's out there.
Like Plan B. Plan B, the Plan B video, for people that may or may not know about this, there was a group of wrestlers. Bob Orton Jr. probably would have been the one that would have suffered the most from this, although Ronnie Garvin was in it, Bob Roop, the great Malenko. They put out a video, or they recorded a video of them completely letting the cat out of the bag in wrestling in a time period where that would have actually been shocking, before like the 2020 stuff happened and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it only came out a couple of years ago. Somebody put the tape out that wasn't out since the 80s, and nobody knows where it came from, including the people that were in it. So it's weird that these things just kind of get released out of nowhere after all this time.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if these are the things we've seen so far, what else is out there as far as just, content that's been taped that, maybe those involved were like, hey, we're never going to release that. And then all these years later, it's been released. To turn it back to wrestling specifically, what's your earliest memory of wrestling? Whether it was watching it for the first time, or hearing about it, or reading about it for the first time.
Well, my mother was, I guess you could say, when I was a kid, she wanted to be home with me. So she babysat another kid to supplement her income. My father was working full time. And the kid that she was looking after was 2 or 3 years older than me, and really a huge wrestling fan, because this was the 80s when wrestling was huge. And because this kid was probably 2.5, 3 years older than me, he was around me during my years where I was developing, starting to talk. So he was kind of like implanting wrestling in me, because he had all the toys. And like, since he was obsessed with it, I kind of automatically became obsessed with it. But the very first memory I have of wrestling, of when I first became interested in it, was I remember his parents had taped the Saturday night main event where the Mega Powers exploded. And he had brought the tape, and we were allowed to watch it for our video that day. And just the whole thing where the Mega Powers broke up, the emotion of it all. It may have been one of the most well done angles of all time without question. But that particular episode of Saturday Night Main Event, I remember it hooked me, and I was devastated that the Mega Powers broke up. Not necessarily because I was a Hogan fan. I was a big Macho Man fan, and I did not like that Macho Man was a bad guy. I would like pray every night that that Macho Man would reunite with Hogan, and I was adopted. So I like created a fantasy in my mind that like maybe Macho Man and Elizabeth were my real mother and father. And like, I was like fully obsessed.
Yeah.
Right away. I never missed a single live event from, I think the first match that came to my town after that was Macho Man against Brutus Beefcake. And I saw that house show. And when I went to that house show, I was even more addicted because I loved the atmosphere of the house show, and that like you can see these guys that they're your heroes on TV up close in person. And again, this was still the 80s. It was packed and the crowd was going wild. So that's pretty much how I got hooked. And it kept getting worse and worse. Throughout my life, I always wanted to be a wrestler. There's pictures of me wrestling when I'm like 4 or 5 years old in my backyard, dressed as Macho Man, and later on dressed as The Undertaker. And we would actually have professional like backyard shows where we would sell tickets to the kids for like 25 and 50 cents. And then we would sell popcorn and lemonade and pop and stuff. So I would make like, to a kid, $30-$35 and change for putting on a wrestling event. Yeah. That was pretty good money.
No, that's really good money. I love that. You'll appreciate this, I think. I have 2 early memories of wrestling, and I can't remember which came first. One of them would have been, and I think this might be the earliest, I was in a similar situation, was being babysat, and the kid's house I was at was just sitting there waiting for my mom to come pick us up. His mom would keep us all the time. He's a little bit older, and his mom says, well, let's go out in the driveway and we'll wait for your mom to pull up and go get in the car. And he grabs a couple of toys and takes them outside. And I remember one was a Hollywood Hogan, and I swear the other was Sting. And I just remember looking at him, I was like, man, my action figures don't look like that. And it was like, there's something about the way those 2 guys look that's different than anything I'd seen before. And then somewhere down the line on the TV Guide channel, where it shows everything that's on TV for the day on all the different channels, they played an ECW promo, and it was like steel chairs, barbed wire, thumbtacks. And, as a little kid, it's like, what, like they're hitting people with it. Like the only time I see stuff like that is on the news when people are getting arrested. And it just like snaps something in my brain where it's like, okay, I don't know what that is, but I need to get as much of it as I can. And now here I am several years later, doing this. What was it like for you whenever, because you said you knew you always wanted to be a wrestler. What was it like whenever you actually started training and we kind of came to the moment where it's like, okay, I've always wanted to do this. How do I go about doing it?
Well, it didn't happen the way that I had planned for it to happen. Me and my buddy always planned that we would go to the power plant when we graduated high school. But I guess WCW went out of business my senior year of high school. So that was out of the window. But my last few years of high school, I ended up developing into a very accomplished amateur wrestler, and I got into amateur wrestling because I'd always heard that it was a good base to have for professional wrestling. And that was the main reason why I got into it. I actually won the States, the equivalent of the States, my last 2 years of high school. My last year of high school, I didn't even have a point scored on me in high school competition. And I also was doing university level tournaments in my senior year of high school, which was good because when you're used to wrestling men, you really don't have that intimidation factor when you're in there against the high school kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I did get 3 or 4 medals at university open tournaments while I was still in high school. I ended up winning the Canadian Freestyle Nationals. And I did have 2 scholarship offers, one to the University of Buffalo and one to Simon Fraser in British Columbia, Canada, which was able to give out scholarships because they were part of the NAIA at that time. I don't know if they still are. But for those that don't know, Canada isn't allowed to give out. It may have changed now, but back then, they were not allowed to give out athletic scholarships, only academic. It was completely different. Yeah, it was weird. But yeah, basically what happened was I had accepted those, but then as I mentioned, WCW had just closed. Eric Bischoff had been in charge of WCW for most of the last few years when it was at its peak. And he had joined the Hearts and created something called Mat Rats, which was going to be like a kids wrestling federation with kids dancing around the ring. Eric Bischoff and Jason Hervey were involved. Natalia was there, TJ Wilson, Ted Hart, Harry Smith, Rene Dupree, Rick Victor, who went on to be in the Ascension, was part of it. Jack Evans was in it. A lot of wrestlers that went on to have decent careers and are still having careers were part of it. So I saw that they were looking for kids, teenagers that were good athletes. And because I always wanted to be a wrestler, pro wrestler, I sent them videos of my amateur wrestling and said, hey, I'm the national champion. I'm interested in being part of this. Of course, since the Hearts always had like a soft spot for amateur wrestling, they called me back fairly soon after sending those tapes. And they told me that they were going to fly me out to do a pilot for Mat Rats. Like a month later, I'd be trained for 2 weeks, and then I would have the match at the end of that 2 weeks, and they would pay my flight accommodation. And I think it was something like $1,000 or something like that. Wow. So I accepted it, went down there. They really didn't do much training with us at all. It was very disorganized. And Ted and I have had our ups and downs, but like he was supposed to be one of the ones in charge of the training for that. They hardly trained us at all. I ended up accidentally headbutting TJ Wilson's jaw open during the opening segment of the pilot, which we are good friends now, and he eventually forgave me for that, but he wasn't happy with me that night. But basically, I wasn't trained that well, but when I did have the matches, I really enjoyed it. So much so that without any contracts and with them just telling me, come back, something's going to happen out of this, I said, the hell with this to my scholarships. And I drove out there to Calgary to pursue the wrestling dream. And for anyone that doesn't know Canadian geography, where Calgary is near Montana. And where I live is on the border with upstate New York. So I had to drive pretty much across the country to go train. And it's my whole career is a long story, but as it turns out, the Mat Rats group didn't end up training me that much. I ended up basically just going very poor. And I eventually did get some better training with Jacques Rougeau. And then when I reached my peak with Jacques Rougeau, I went back to Calgary, but this time I had enough money to join the actual dungeon. And it was at that point where I feel I started to really get the good training, and that combined with experience, I ended up becoming a good wrestler.
It reminds me, you saying that driving all the way across there, because for a lot of Americans here in the United States, it's like, oh, like, you know, it's a 20-minute drive, right? And it's like, no, look at the map. It's way longer. But it makes me think, was it Deep South or was it OVW that you were there for a couple of weeks training?
Deep South, I was there for like a month training. It was during the time I was wrestling in Puerto Rico. I had passed like a test to be able to train without a contract in Deep South.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on it, I should have stayed there, stuck it out longer. But the training there was highly unusual, as I've described, which I could get into one of the stories briefly. But the thing of it was, I was actually a star wrestler in Puerto Rico at that time. I had held championships. We were on TV. So it's like I was kind of famous in Puerto Rico, and I was getting paid, not making anything huge. But in Deep South, I was paying to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I was being treated like shit by everybody because if you're not under contract, they just treat you like absolute shit. And the thing that made me actually leave was some weird thing where instead of training one day, Zack Ryder volunteered to take something like 12 donuts to the face with him sitting in the corner of the ring and Luke Gallows completely naked in the ring other than a fist over his dick. And then Bill DeMott would hold the donut over his face. Gallows would like run into Ryder and he would have to squish the donut until DeMott gave him the cue that it was okay to stop. And everyone was cheering and all this. And it was just like, I came here to train. I was broke at that point. I wasn't making much in Puerto Rico and I was paying to train there. It's like, they're just treating me like shit here. And I don't consider this wrestling. They're just doing whatever they can to get out of the drills.
Yeah.
So I stayed one more week after that. Then I went back to Puerto Rico. But in the long run, even though I was being treated like shit by the trainees, because I had the size and stuff, I think if I had just stayed there and stuck it out, because they ended up closing Deep South because of stupid shit like that. Mm-hmm. 2 or 3 months later, because it didn't last till the end of the year. It was shut down before the end of the year, and I was there in about October. So I think if I had just stuck it out the last 2 months, they probably would have just given me a contract, but whatever. The whole reason being I didn't end up staying there. It was a bad experience overall.
I can't remember who. There's somebody I heard recently on a podcast, and they were talking about that incident, and they kind of paused and they were like, man, like, okay, producers of Dark Side of the Ring, if you want to make one about Deep South, reach me out, because I've got videos and I've got pictures. Like we can unearth that. And even, you know, as a fan, you know, just some of the things you hear, and it feels like it all depends on, were they signed or were they not signed? Because there's two completely different experiences. There's some people, it's like, yeah, they were here for 2 weeks and we went ahead and, called them up to the main roster. But then there's other people where it's like, hey, we did a drill where, everyone stretched me. And then at the end, Bill DeMott just sat on me and, cross-faced me just because he knew I'd be too exhausted. But it's one of those things to where it's interesting to see kind of the history of WWE developmental, from kind of the territory days up until now. And I don't know if it's gotten better with the way things are run now, or, you hear stories of guys trying to break in the 80s and just some of the things they had to go through, to even get a shot. It's just interesting for me as a fan, because up until, just recent years, being completely in the dark about how those kind of things go.
I think that it should be hard to break in. I like how the dungeon did it. There's nobody that passed the dungeon that wasn't tough. They had ways of like separating you if you couldn't cut it in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
The Bill DeMott stuff was a lot of sexual stuff and just weird cliquish stuff, more so than, yeah, you did have to do 500 squats, but whatever.
Yeah.
You're aware that you're going to have to be doing that. I never had any issues with that. It's the weird stuff. Like, for instance, the one thing where we had to push somebody's Hummer around the mall because Deep South was in a mini mall. But rather than do laps normally, we had to strip to our underwear, both males and females, and each one do 2 laps pushing it around, just as like humiliation.
Yeah. And it's like, how is that beneficial at all to, wrestling in itself? Because, on one hand, you hear the story of, the guys who are like, yeah, I did 500 squats every day. And it's like, okay, that's the kind of thing I need to be doing. But I would argue to say, like, doing the weird stuff, like you said, it's like that, where does that fall in line as far as preparing you to succeed as a wrestler?
Yeah. And I had issues too with some people that were like telling me that they were going to give me rides and then not showing up to give me rides, where that just gets me in trouble. Eventually I bought a bicycle, and I bicycled because the Deep South people told me when I went there, because as I said, I came from Puerto Rico. My car was in Canada. I said, do I need to go to Canada? And they're like, no, everyone lives in the same compound. You won't have any issues. You all go to practice together. Just give them gas money. But little did I know, you're entering a world of cliques where they see you as competition, and it's dog eat dog. So yeah, that was a bad experience. But whatever.
Yeah. It's one of those things to where it's like, it just doesn't make sense. And I see it a lot in the music industry, to where it's one of those things to where, there's the hard work path to success. And then there's like the scumbag shady, like, I'll stab you in the back and do whatever I can to sabotage you if it means taking your spot or keeping my spot, I guess.
And that does exist. I was interviewing Canadian champion Jeremy Prophet earlier today, and he mentioned it. And okay, maybe it's because I'm from a trusting family, but I've made this mistake many times, and I've been too trusting in wrestling, and I've paid for it. And I always like to trust people, and I always like to think they have the same intentions as me, for example. But it's happened to me many times where I've just been used and spit out.
Yeah. And it's just a horrible thing, because I feel the same way. It's like, well, Like, I want people to trust me. And when I say something, they know I'm going to do it. Is it too much to ask for to expect the same thing from other people? I mean, there's even at, it's crazy how even at small, I would say unsuccessful levels of whatever industry it is, I think mainly in the entertainment, whether it's athletics or art or music or stuff like that, the way people will, take advantage of your kindness and your trust. And, I mean, sure, I guess it's one thing if there's a lot of money on the line or something, but it's like, to put it in a music perspective, it's like, hey, we were both just playing for tips only, and you took full advantage of, my generosity to let you take a little extra time or something like that. It's just, I think it's extremely petty and ridiculous. So that's why, this whole idea of the podcast is to focus on the good things about wrestling, the things that we like and we enjoy. Because even just getting on social media, you see fans that are just so toxic, and it's like, well, why do you even why do you like wrestling? Why do you follow any wrestling if all you do is you either try and stir up trouble or you just, talk about what you hate? To where on the flip side, it's like, man, give me all the weird Teddy Long interviews in the world, because that's the stuff I love and that's the stuff I want to see, versus like, well, I don't like the way they're doing this on this show. And it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hide that I don't watch the current products because I don't want to turn into that. I know that I'm not going to like them, and I don't want to do a podcast about that. I try and just report the news because I'm interested in the news. No matter what, I'm kind of addicted to the wrestling news. I like to know what's going on behind the scenes, so may as well report on it, make a job out of it. And yes, I have been screwed over, but I'm not complaining. I actually have the most popular combat sports podcast based in Canada. And even very recently I was screwed over because I wasted months helping people that ended up taking advantage of me, although I should have just invested that in myself, I'm still really not that much the worse for wear over wasting that 4 months of my time. I'm still doing great and I still have my fans. So I'm not complaining. I just got to be more careful with who I trust in the future, or have, as much as I hate getting lawyers involved. I mean, there's a reason why all major companies have contracts. So everything's laid out.
Yeah. And I mean, it speaks volumes of your character and your personality that, just the adversities you continue to overcome. And even, as someone on the outside looking in, I mean, to put it frankly, like the sucky hands, that I heard someone explain it one time is like a life tax. It's like, sometimes the bad things just happen and that's just what we get for being alive. But seeing the way that you take those opportunities to show your strength and to keep going, it's always been very admirable for me. And the way that you do present the news and the way that you do the things, like a couple of months back when you were going over, who is the highest drawing WCW champion of all time in terms of viewership and stuff. It's like those deep dives that you're not going to get anywhere else. But it's like that's history. And even to put it in perspective of, okay, how many weeks in a row has Raw had the lowest rating in history? And then the next week it's like, hey, once again, lowest rating in history. And then next week, the lowest rating in history. So for me as a fan, it means a lot to me to be able to see you cover that side, if that makes sense.
Which, by the way, I was also just talking today with the same guy, Jeremy Prophet, in an interview earlier today, that Bobby Lashley has actually been in the 0.5s, where Raw was stuck in the 0.4s forever with Drew McIntyre. So there has been some improvement lately.
I will say, even watching WrestleMania this year, it was seeing the crowd reaction to that match. It was one of those things because I feel like sometimes with big products like that, it's almost, okay, are the fans going to hijack the crowd and kind of push their narrative, or are we going to let things play out organically? And to see the reaction of, okay, Lashley's going to get crapped on for winning because Drew's supposed to, storyline wise, Drew's is supposed to get his moment in front of the people, and to hear the eruption when he wins, and it's like, okay, that was genuine and that's natural. And I think, going back to the Hogan Macho Man stuff, personally for me, like my favorite stuff is the stuff that's natural and organic. To put it in recent terms, like the Matt Hardy Edge feud from years back, where it's a real life situation, unfortunately, but it's like, the emotion in there impacts as a fan a lot deeper, if that makes sense.
Yes. And yeah, that was a memorable one for sure.
Or
the one thing I will say about this year's WrestleMania, which turned me off of even trying to watch it, is at the start when they had all the heels and faces come out and just give a big round of applause. It's like you're showing that the heels are nice, and then we're just supposed to forget all of this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's frustrating for me as someone who is like, my favorite moments in wrestlings are one when I was younger and I didn't know all the information I knew, and just being able to be completely sucked in and invested in what was taking place. And I can't remember, maybe it was Jim Cornette or someone like that who said, you don't have to, don't tell us it's real, but don't tell us it's fake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like that's what you're doing to start off the show.
Yeah.
And what I was wondering is, what's the point? Would anyone would have cared if you just kept the heels off of that?
Right. Yeah.
I don't understand like what the benefit is, but they're literally getting $1 billion from Peacock. They're getting hundreds of millions to billions from TV networks. So they're doing all right. They're not going out of business anytime soon, and they're doing what they want to do, and that's their choice.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's like, even with, business wise, they're doing something right for the fact that, during the pandemic, they had record breaking profits.
Yeah.
But then, as a fan, you see the product and it's like, there's a disconnect there, but it is what it is. And, the beauty of wrestling is being able to go back and watch stuff from the past. And especially, like, I didn't know that before. And then now we're getting to the age where, it's more likely to hear people talk about, well, this is how we were building it up the whole time. And just a lot of the stuff you do, you hear something famous, and then to hear the guys involved actually talk about it and their side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling is still popular. It's just, as you said, it might not be the current products that are. People still want to know the shoot interviews because those fans aren't dead. There might not be all the younger kids coming up fans as there used to be. I don't see kids. I mean, malls are closed now, but I was in Texas malls not too long ago. I didn't see any wrestling shirts. I remember during the Attitude Era, you'd go to a mall, people had shirts on. You'd go to school, the cool kids would have NWO and Austin 316 shirts on. And I don't think you're going to see a cool kid with a Fiend shirt on. There was a story last year about a kid getting beat up for wearing a Fiend shirt.
Yeah. I remember there was somebody, I want to say maybe it was Kylie Jenner, someone like that, one of those celebrities. There was a big deal about she wore an NWO Wolfpack sweatshirt, and it just blew up because everyone was like, what is it? Like, what's this NWO thing people are talking about? And it's like, man, rewind 20 years and the fact that everybody knew what that was, just with how powerful wrestling's influence was on the mainstream.
Yeah, it was amazing to see back in those days how popular it got. Because I was there, I became a fan when everyone liked it. Then there was that 5 or 6 year period where it was not cool, and I was actually bullied, and that was maybe partly when I started like getting in fights and stuff as a kid, because people would make fun of me. And then it was interesting to see in like the late 90s, it went full circle, and like it was suddenly very cool to be a wrestling fan again. But yeah, a lot of people will say MMA overtook it too, but if you look at the ratings, which, as you probably know, I follow all the ratings, wrestling still kicks MMA's ass in the ratings, not the pay-per-views. But I think it's just the characters aren't there, and the product isn't presented in an entertaining fashion. I don't think it's because now there's a real sport out there that people would rather watch. I'm not like, I'll watch MMA, but it doesn't turn me off or on of watching wrestling.
Right. Yeah. That's what I never understood. The people where it's like, hey, you got to pick and choose. It's like, why wouldn't I want both? You know, it's like, hey, you can have steak or you can have lobster. And it's like, why can't I have both? You know, why do I have to only stick with one? I saw an article on Twitter. Somebody had shared a paper they'd gotten in school when they were younger, where they got called. It was a letter the head of the school sent to this kid's parents as kind of like a gang violence report, because he had a club called NWO, and their initiation was they had to punch kids 30 times each. And it's like, it's crazy to think there was that going around, you know, wrestling had that much of an influence, versus like today, you know, how many kids are on the playground pretending to be the Inner Circle, or, you know, pretending to be Retribution or something. And it's like, hey, you want to join our club? You know, you have to let us, you know, pour orange juice on you for 30 minutes at lunch every day or something like that.
Yeah, I just think it's lost its coolness factor. They can still bring back interest here and there if they want to bring The Rock in or Goldberg in to get the older fans back, but there's no like permanent fix out there that I'm seeing at this moment. There needs to be like a true alternative, similar to like the Attitude Era and the ECW-ish style, but so far no one's able to pull that off. And WWE, it's only going to get more corporate. Anyone watching this, they're not going to change. They're making a lot of money and they're selling out to corporations for a lot of money. They're not going to suddenly go the opposite direction.
Right. Yeah. It's not, you know, people are always like, oh, when so-and-so gets in charge, you know, it's going to go the opposite way. And it's like, with that much money on the line, there's no way they're, you know, they're going to back out and be like, oh, no, money. We're not in it for the money. We're in it for, you know, the love of it.
There's too many advertisers and sponsors and networks to answer to. And as you mentioned, they're having record profits. So until there's a catch up, that's not going to happen. And AEW, they originally were going to go back, said they were going to go back to the old school way, which they didn't end up doing. They have shown some more violent matches, but from what I saw from like the last War Games style match they did, the end with Jericho looked so phony. It was clearly a clash pad, and the people in the match bladed so obviously that it wasn't like the old days where you could really suspend your disbelief. And I didn't really believe anyone was necessarily trying to hurt anyone else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad there's other places for wrestlers to work though. And there's definitely a fan base that loves AEW, and more power to them. I don't discriminate against people that like any type of wrestling.
Yeah. I think going back to talking about things looking believable and, you know, that suspension of disbelief, Um, it weirds me out that it's been almost 10 years. But whenever Brock Lesnar first went back to WWE and he had that feud with John Cena, and there were a couple of things I think they did. One of the big brawls where everyone in the back comes out to separate them, and I want to say maybe Brock got a black eye and John got busted lips, but it was one of those things like, hang on, like they might actually like hate each other, and as a fan, it's like, okay, like I know what John Cena's been doing the last 10 years. I know Brock Lesnar's been in UFC, but where is this going to go? And then, it led to they had like a street fight or no holds barred match or something, and it was just believable. I can't remember who ref that match, but I remember the visual of the ref is laid outside the ring and Brock grabs him by the belt loop. And just like a gym bag, just picks him up with one arm, sets him on the side of the ring and pushes him in. It's like, okay, like, as a fan watching, it's like, if Brock Lesnar wants to kill who's ever in the ring, I fully believe he'll do it anytime he wants.
Yeah, I think it was Tom Pritchard who I interviewed yesterday that says he's not active right now, but in his opinion, Brock is still the biggest star in wrestling. Due to that, he can still get the believability part.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, once again, you get on social media and you look at the hate he receives, but it's like, he's a real heel.
Yeah. And as you mentioned earlier with McIntyre, it's like, I read his publicity leading up to WrestleMania. It's like, he's not even talking about winning the belt back in a lot of it. I want my moment, my lovely moment in front of the fans. It's like, don't you care about the title?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't have heard Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant say he just wants his moment.
Yeah.
His special moment. It's like, I don't know. If someone that's really cool shouldn't care that much about a special moment, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes me think. I think it's WrestleMania 17, Rock Austin, and they have the famous build-up video, and they have the sit-down interview with JR and Stone Cold. It's like, with all due respect, like I need to beat you, and it's because of that championship, and just the importance of it versus, I don't know, and I mean this in the nicest way. I don't know of any current wrestling promotion where, the world title feels like that's the biggest, most important thing you can hold at the moment.
Yeah, there's no real overworld title right now. The last one would have been New Japan's, I think, but it's kind of lost it. I don't think there's really an overworld champion. There's so many titles in WWE now too.
Yeah.
And then Impact now recognizes AEW's as a world champion, and I don't even know who the Ring of Honor world champion is. So
it's just it's kind of a sad thing because even with the championship, how much natural story building do you have just sitting right there where it's like, hey, someone's currently the best, because they're the champion. I want to be the best and beat them and be the same thing. To me, when there's not that emphasis, it just makes me think of sports. Like you take a UFC fight, it's like, yeah, I could fight for the belt, but I'm just happy to be here. If I win, awesome. If not, it's okay. It's like, well, then what are you doing here?
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's weird. Well, man, I don't want to keep you super long. So I want to end on one last thing. Do you have any interviews? Do you have a specific interview you want to get done in 2021? Like if there's one person, it's like, hey, like I want to snag them and get an interview with them.
Well, Jesse Ventura is still pretty high on my list. Everybody wants Nails. They're both in the Minnesota area, so we'll see if I can pull those off before the end of the year. Those would be some big ones. One guy I really want is, why is his name slipping my mind? I got to look it up right now. The lead singer of Blink 182 is also a UFO researcher, and I can't understand. Let me see. Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
Tom DeLonge. Yeah, he's somebody I really want to interview. He's been involved in a lot of meetings where a lot of information has been disclosed. He can't disclose it all, but he knows a lot about what's going on in the UFO world. So personally, he would be my number one person to interview, but Jesse Ventura is up there. I know the fans want it to happen, so hopefully it'll happen. I did have an agent contact for him at one point, but it ended up being fake guy. So I'll keep working on it. I know Brian Blair is still friends with him. Maybe I'll try hooking it up through one of the old friends. But the other reason I want to interview Jesse sooner than later is because Billy Graham is still alive, and I'd like them to at least have like one conversation together before it's too late.
Yeah, I would love that. Personally, I would love to see that, with just how great at talkers they still are and storytellers, and just, to me, as someone on the outside, like, that's money on the table right there, of just letting them, just put the microphone there and let them go at it.
I mean, that's one of the things WWE has screwed up on huge with Billy Graham. Huge. He still has a very sharp mind and a good mind, and they just waste him. The whole time he was under Legends contract, they didn't use him for anything other than put out a few toys and a T-shirt. It's like, get video of him, have him come and give speeches to the NXT people, have him file some reports, like give him the payday and like make use of his brain. He invented the term superstar for wrestling. Hulk Hogan stole brother from him. He stole pythons, the shirt rip, the ear cup. Like, Billy would have been Hogan, but he just has so much to give, and unfortunately it's probably going to all go to waste. But he's a tough guy, and he'll keep surviving away. And for any fans that want to watch this, if you're not already following the Hannibal TV, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and YouTube at the Hannibal TV. Twitch, we are at Great North Wrestling, and our website with all the links is thehannibaltv.com.
Awesome. Well, Hannibal, thank you again so much for taking some time out of your evening to come on here. I know our listeners will eat this up. And man, once again, just thank you so much for being willing to be a part of this.
Thank you. And you help out with a lot of our compilation videos and some of the videos where the sound didn't record the best, fixing it up. So we appreciate all your help over the past year or so.
Absolutely. I'm honored to do it. It's funny. I actually, I don't think I've ever told you this. One of the reasons I reached out to you is one, just the desire to help out with wrestling content like this, but also, with the whole COVID lockdown and stuff, it's like, man, I can't play music anymore. And there's not a whole lot of people recording music. It's like, man, I gotta switch over to editing more than performing. So I'm personally grateful for the opportunity you've given me to be able to do that. And I love the fact that I get to listen to these interviews all the time, and I get to go through this content. And there are times, especially if it's like Tony Atlas or someone, where it's like, okay, I gotta take a break because I'm just laughing the whole time instead of listening for things I need to edit or things like that.
Well, I'm looking forward. I know it was supposed to happen if my last stay wasn't cut short, but I'd like to see over the course of the summer some more cinematic type matches So those might be some more fun for you to use your skills as far as musical talents to mix in with videos.
Absolutely. And I'm just saying, some of the things I've seen, it gets me really excited for the future of wrestling and the fact that there is good content out there. And that's not to disgrade anybody else, but the fact it's like, okay, like these are people to keep eyes on, and this is stuff to watch out for.
Very good. Well, I appreciate everything. Wish you the best on your podcast, and everyone check out the HannibalTV.com and subscribe to all of our social media. We really appreciate all the support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hannibal.
And we are back in Studio 316. What a great interview that was. I'm excited that we get to share that. I'm exceptionally excited that you finally got to sit down with him. I know you've been trying on this for a while. It's hard to believe that you've been working for him for a year now. Like, it seems like that just started.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about that a little bit. One of the reasons I initially reached out to him was not only because I want to work in that field, but also is like when COVID happened and everything shut down, I was like, man, I can't play music anywhere anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
I got to find out some other audio stuff I can do. And so it was a shot in the dark, and there were a lot of weeks in between. And then all of a sudden I heard back from him, and rest is history.
COVID literally helped you become your best self.
Yeah.
Literally. Let you expand your horizons.
Yeah. I got married and I got in the biz, brother.
Well, man, that was an awesome interview. I'm excited to share it with the folks, with all the brothers and the sisters and kayfabe, and who knows, we might get some other big names. We're working on it. We've got some indie guys that we're going to talk to. I'm reaching out into DMs, so if people want to be on the podcast, we're going to try to get them on through DMs on Twitter. But with that, is there anything you want to plug, Landon?
Not really. You heard Hannibal plug it, but definitely check out his YouTube channel. There's just a lot of great content. It should be out by the time you're watching this. I helped edit a Sid Vicious compilation where it's guys talking about Sid Vicious, one about Billy Jack Haynes, and then as you heard, the Plan B documentary. You need to go watch that yourself. Really, really crazy for the time being, as we mentioned during the interview, that it was exposing the business and kind of talking about some of the more touchy aspects of the wrestling business, but it was never released. You know, you'd guys like Ronnie Garvin and Bob Orton in that. So check that out if you hadn't seen it. It's about 20 minutes long. But yeah, I mean, that's all I've got.
As always, follow the Facebook page. Go check out our very cheap, very awesome Patreon. $5 a month,
where you will get the video version of that interview with Hannibal.
Yeah, and you will be able to see Hannibal on the video version, which all of our podcasts from here on out are going to have a video version, only on the Patreon. So if it's something special that we feel that we need to share on YouTube, we'll share it on YouTube. But for now, it's just going to go on Patreon. And that's the only way you'll be able to get that part. And there's a lot of stuff that we do on here that is better on the audio, on the video side. I mean, I know it's easier to listen to this on the way to work whenever it's on, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that. But some of the stuff you're only going to get to see, like I'm holding something up. What is it? I don't know. Y'all don't know. You're not listening. You're not watching on the Patreon. So, you didn't get to see what I bought for $4 on eBay. I'll probably post it in the Facebook group, but
it's an awesome purchase.
So, go join the Facebook group, join the Patreon. We're on Twitter, BKFabe, the letter B, Kfabe. Follow us on our personal pages if you'd like. I know that Landon's been doing some figure photography and stuff, so that's fun. Other podcasts are about to drop again. I know that it's been kind of a running joke of this podcast that best movie ever is a thing, and it's about to be a completely rehaul of that show with best movie ever part 2. Yeah, so that's coming back. I think I'm gonna do all our childhood movies this season.
I think you absolutely need to.
Like, go back and watch the stuff that we loved as a kid and see if it holds up. That sounds like fun to me.
I love that. I love that.
So, as always, watch wrestling. Talk to us about wrestling. We want to talk to you. If you want to be on the podcast, contact us. We'll talk to you. We love talking to our brothers and our sisters, and hopefully we get more of that here soon, because I think we're due for a Jimmy episode if we can get him on.
Hey, May 30th. We may
30th.
need to see if we can pull something together.
Yeah, we are getting together for Double or Nothing, the first AEW show that's going to be full attendance. Stadium Stampede 2, Kenny versus Orange versus Pac. It's going to be a hot match. It's going to be a great show. So, like us on Apple Podcasts. Give us a review. If you give us a review, maybe we might be able to give some stuff away. I would love to start giving away something to people who are reviewed and subscribed to us on their platforms. So
yeah, hashtag free merch.
Whether it's one of our own t-shirts, whether it's a magnet, whether it's a action figure, or something fun, wrestling related.
I'm not opposed to making some custom Mr. Rasslin DVDs. I'll hook you up. You guys don't even know.
There is some footage out there. So, with that, I think we're gonna end this episode. Can't wait to be back next week. Landon, are you going to be back with another Professor Rasslin's wrestling school?
I am. And so I'm just going to speak this into existence right now, Jake. I think next week we do a double header. I think I'm going to do a deep dive on Wrestling with Shadows. And I think we do a confession / tale of a tape trader live watch along of Hitman Wrestling with Shadows.
How great would that be if we could live stream that?
Hey, for the Patreon for $5, you can essentially watch it with us.
Yeah, we could probably make that happen. So
yeah.
That being said, thank you guys. Let's get a Too Sweet in here, bro.
Let's do it. Too
sweet for life.